my name is Lydia Kramer-Kite, and I'm working through my master competency, which is a SWOT analysis on Dr. Brenner's paper in medical movement. We're first going to discuss strengths of his thought process for this movement, and we'll start with his mission and vision. So his mission was to provide quality care that was client-centered to patients that were the sick of the sick, and this would in return decrease the cost medically that they were having, specifically for ER visits. So he built relationships with hospitals, and so those physicians that he built relationships with would refer their clients or their patients to Dr. Brenner. They were the sick of the sick again, and so they kind of were like, yes, take them off my hands. Here are these patients. So they were referring patients to him, which was really beneficial. And then they also would allow him to their monitor software system. And so what this means is that he could see when these patients were returning to the ER. He could also see when they were getting other procedures, x-rays, MRIs, and he would kind of look and decide, should they be getting these services, or are they necessary? And he kind of would evaluate that. Again, he put the patient first, and he really built rapport with them. He kind of focused on their needs, not only medically, but kind of globally. And so this quickly built rapport and trust with his patients. He was flexible with hours, and him and his nurse practitioners would do home visits, or if they couldn't do home visits, they would do phone calls that could work the patient through the crisis that they were having. And so all of this allowed his model to have major strengths. And then there were some weaknesses. And so those weaknesses really started with legislation and funding. There were certain legislations, rules and laws that are in place that wouldn't allow certain services like Medicare and Medicaid to pay his clinic and his services. And this would make funding lower. Sometimes they would do things for free or pro bono, or they couldn't charge as much as other clinics could based on their networks. Because their clients were vulnerable, patient follow-through wasn't great. One of the examples he talks about was how there was this female who was sick and had medical problems, but she was also addicted to drugs. And so because of that, they would kind of have to track her down, and she would be fine and want to work through their recommendations for a couple days, and then she'd fall back off. And so sometimes their follow through wasn't great. The trust of the team. And so the patients really trusted Dr. Brenner, but they were not too keen on trusting the nurse practitioners, the case managers, and the other physicians. One of the points that he talked about was how in the towers he wanted to make a facility that was in the tower, so they didn't even have to leave their home. They could just go downstairs and the facility would be there. And when some of the residents found out that a case manager would be there, they're like, oh no, she's going to be poking into my personal business and my life, and I don't necessarily like that. And it was just because they hadn't built that trust with her like they had Dr. Brenner. Because of the funding and rules and laws that were in place, Dr. Brenner couldn't pay case managers, nurse practitioners, and physicians at a competitive rate. And so not a lot of people were just willing to drop their higher salaries to come and work for him, especially with a movement that, wasn't huge at that time. They didn't have a stable office space, so even though they were flexible with their visits and when they could visit, they didn't have a stable office, and so patients would have to call a hotline, then they would have to get through to one of the nurse practitioners or physicians or case managers, and then they would have to go to their home or find them. And so if there was a stable spot that they could go, then it would have made it a little bit of a stronger aspect, having a building, having a place that was stable and in place. So opportunities. The hospital support was a huge opportunity because it allowed physicians to refer their patients to Dr. Brenner for him to take over their care. It allowed them to monitor how many times their patients were going to the ER, as well as other services that were being provided. Good community response. So the patients that were being seen by Dr. Brenner, they were having a good response. They were building rapport with him. They were taking their health into a higher consideration. They were kind of being a little more proactive with it and listening to what Dr. Brenner was recommending. And so their response was good. They were supporting it. And when they were supporting it, it was decreasing their hospital visits, which in return was saving money on hospital visits and medical bills for those people. So there were some threats that were present and government restrictions. We kind of talked about this. The government had laws and regulations in place, and so that was hindering the funding that it could occur. Lack of support. So some physicians were not supporting this movement because they felt Dr. Brenner was taking business from them. One of the things that was talked about in the article was about the female that was a casino worker and how she had gone to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist had continued to make her come and visit him for all these routine checkups. And, they kind of questioned, is this necessary? Do we need to do this? And that cardiologist took it that Dr. Brenner was trying to take that patient, which he was. That patient was guaranteed money every time that they came to see that cardiologist. And if that patient realized that they didn't need to see him for those routine checks, then it would take money out of his pocket. And then sustainability. How long can it sustain working, round the clock, long hours with a low salary? They're doing things past medical care, like finding contractors that are willing to come in and fix their home. They're helping them find transportation. And so it's really long hours with low pay. If someone offers them less work for more money, would they take it as an employee? Lack of interest. If you're not in those two areas that he was focused on, or you weren't the sick of the sick, you don't really have interest in it. And so, unless you're directly being affected, there wasn't much interest there. Medical model physicians and healthcare providers were just going through the motions of their process, and they weren't really able to slow down because of productivity standards and just the amount of people they were seeing. They couldn't really devote too much time into it. And then again, we talked about the decreased funds. Culture. So why is culture important? And was Dr. Brenner kind of facilitating this? So Dr. Brenner was facilitating a lot of these within his practice. And so awareness, sensitivity, competency, individualized care, respect, and altering treatment. And so patient care is enhanced if the healthcare provider is demonstrating cultural sensitivity, respecting the patient's beliefs and values, and if you provide appropriate care and communication to your patient, it's going to increase their health, right? And that makes sense because if we are understanding their needs culturally and we're respecting them, then we're going to provide more individualized care. And why is that important? Well, I mean, in one family, if they have a certain culture, their roles may be different. Their perception of independence can be different. And so we need to really be aware of the culture, be sensitive to that, and know, hey, it might be different than my culture, but I'm here to learn about it and be competent and understand what your goals are to help you reach your cultural needs that you have. And so that's going to tailor individualized care. And so an example would be if someone speaks another language and I'm speaking to them in English, the carryover is not going to be as good. They're not going to understand what I'm saying as well. Where if I get a translator that speaks their language, they're going to understand what I'm saying and they're likely to carry over it because they understand it. Another example would be if I am seeing a male and his culture is that the woman takes care and cooks the meals and takes care of him and If he's sick, she'll put on his shoes. And to him, putting on shoes isn't important, but it is important for him to be able to pick up 20 pounds. Well, I'm going to have to tailor my treatment to what's important to him. And even though it might be a different viewpoint or culture than I was brought up, I still should respect that and tailor my treatment to him. And then respecting their differences and just altering treatment as you need to. So change management is kind of that change that needs to take place for movements to occur. And so Dr. Brenner was implementing some of these within his movement. And the first one is modeling and it being top down. So the leadership and the people that are higher up, they need to model how we are to act and what we are to do. And then it's like a trickle down effect. And so Dr. Brenner did that. He wanted quality care and client centered. So he modeled it and he was hoping that others would pick up on that. Cultural strength is just finding in the culture what people are proud of and then connecting that to your movement. Informal leaders, having people other than management that are natural leaders, kind of implementing your practice and your movement and taking that into consideration, other people will follow suit. Okay, and then your coherent environment is just that, having coherence and everybody's on the same page. So everybody understands the movement and they're executing that movement. Here's a picture of the SWOT analysis. Your strengths and your opportunities are going to be helpful, and these are things that are good within your change, and then the weakness and the threats are those that we need to change. They can be harmful to your company, and you can hopefully develop them into becoming opportunities and strengths. Okay, and then here are my references. And I'm just going to go back so you can kind of look through the SWOT analysis again. This is just a picture of everything that we said. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great day.